After another grueling day of press interviews, Keanu Reeves finally had a moment to check on Laura and the twins, the family he had rescued from human trafficking months ago. As he scrolled through his messages, his heart stopped at the sight of an urgent text from Maria, his trusted villa keeper who had been caring for them. "I'm at the hospital with the twins and their mother." What would unfold in the next few days would change not only his life, but also the destiny of the two young girls who had already endured so much. Before we dive into part 2 of this story, comment where you're watching from, and if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. The crisp autumn air of New York City carried the familiar buzz of rush hour traffic as Keanu Reeves exited the last of several back-to-back media interviews. His shoulders sagged with exhaustion, the weight of the day's relentless questioning and bright studio lights evident in the subtle creases of his once perfectly pressed black suit. Despite the fatigue that threatened to overwhelm him, Keanu's public persona had never wavered during the sessions, a testament to his professionalism and years of experience in the spotlight. As he stepped out onto the bustling sidewalk, Keanu made a decision that would have surprised many of his fans. Instead of calling for a private car or slipping into a waiting limousine, he opted for public transportation. With a well-worn baseball cap pulled low over his eyes and his demeanor casual and unassuming, he blended seamlessly into the evening crowd, heading for the subway. The underground station hummed with the energy of tired commuters eager to return home. Keanu stood, one hand gripping a cold metal pole as the subway car lurched into motion. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered occasionally, casting strange shadows across the faces of his fellow passengers. None seemed to recognize the celebrity in their midst, and Keanu was grateful for the anonymity. As the train rumbled through the dark tunnels beneath the city, Keanu's mind drifted to thoughts of Laura and the twins he had helped rescue 3 months ago. The memory of their harrowing escape from a human trafficking ring still felt fresh, despite the time that had passed. He wondered how they were adjusting to their new life in his villa, under the care of his trusted housekeeper, Maria. It had been almost a month since he'd last heard any news about them. The lack of communication wasn't entirely unusual. He had wanted to give them space to heal and adjust, without feeling indebted to him. Still, a nagging worry tugged at the edges of his consciousness. Were they truly okay? Had Laura managed to maintain her sobriety? Were the twins, Casey and Freya, settling into their new school routine? The subway journey seemed to stretch on endlessly, each stop blending into the next as Keanu's thoughts continued to swirl. Finally, the train pulled into the suburban station where he had left his car. As he emerged from the underground, the relative quiet of the suburbs was a stark contrast to the city's constant noise. Sliding into the driver's seat of his nondescript sedan, Keanu allowed himself a moment of stillness. The silence inside the car was almost palpable after the day's constant barrage of sound. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to center himself before the drive home. As he navigated the familiar roads leading to his private residence, Keanu's mind wandered back to the last update he had received from Laura. Her voice had been filled with cautious optimism as she spoke of her progress in sobriety and her tentative steps back into the world of graphic design work. It had been her passion before life had taken such a dark turn, and rekindling that creative spark seemed to be giving her a sense of purpose. The twins, too, had seemed to be finding their footing. Casey and Freya had finally started to settle into a routine at the villa, their days structured around school and the gentle guidance of Maria. Keanu smiled softly as he recalled the excitement in their voices as they told him about new friends and favorite subjects. Pulling into the driveway of his home, a separate property from the villa where Laura and the twins were staying, Keanu felt the full weight of the day settle onto his shoulders. He moved through his evening routine with practiced efficiency, the house almost too quiet after the constant noise of the interviews. A hot shower helped to wash away some of the day's tension, and Keanu changed into comfortable clothes, soft, well-worn jeans, and a simple black t-shirt. Making his way to the kitchen, he headed straight for the bar section. The sound of whiskey cubes clinking against glass broke the silence as he prepared a whiskey with tonic water, a small indulgence to help unwind. Settling onto a stool at the bar, Keanu finally allowed himself to check his phone. The time read 7:02 p.m. As he scrolled through his notifications, a message from Robbie, his police friend, caught his attention. It was news about another trafficking group they had managed to catch, one connected to Connie, the ringleader they had taken down months ago. This new group was apparently led by someone named Axel, who specialized in document forgery. Keanu's fingers hovered over the screen as he composed a congratulatory response to Robbie. It was good news, a sign that the larger network was slowly but surely being dismantled. As he waited for Robbie's reply, he continued to scan through his other messages. Suddenly his blood ran cold. There, nestled among work-related emails and social invitations, was a message from Maria, his villa keeper. The preview text alone was enough to send a chill down his spine. "Laura has been rushed to intensive care." Time seemed to stand still as Keanu opened the message with trembling fingers. The full content was even more alarming. Maria's first message had been sent 8 hours ago, followed by increasingly worried updates about the devastated twins. How had he missed this? Guilt and fear warred in his chest as he immediately tried to call Maria, but the call went unanswered. Without hesitation, Keanu contacted his assistant, Patrick. "Clear my schedule for the week," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "Family emergency. I don't care what you have to cancel or reschedule." The whiskey sat forgotten on the bar, barely touched, as Keanu rushed to change clothes once more. He grabbed a hoodie, his car keys, and was out the door in minutes, his mind racing with possibilities and fears as he prepared for the 3-hour drive to the villa. As the city lights faded behind him and the roads became increasingly rural, Keanu's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The usually calming drive now felt endless, each mile marked by growing anxiety about Laura's condition and the twins' well-being. His attempts to reach Maria continued to go unanswered, adding to his unease. The night grew darker, matching Keanu's mood as he pushed onward, desperate to reach the villa and find out what had happened. The headlights of Keanu's car cut through the darkness as he sped along the rural roads leading to his villa. The journey, typically a peaceful drive through picturesque countryside, now felt like an endless gauntlet of twisting roads and looming shadows. Every curve in the path seemed to taunt him, hiding whatever answers lay ahead for just a few moments longer. As the digital clock on his dashboard ticked closer to midnight, Keanu's mind raced with possibilities. What could have happened to Laura? The last he had heard, she had been doing well in her recovery. Had there been a relapse, an accident? The lack of information was maddening, and each unanswered call to Maria only heightened his anxiety. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the familiar gates of the villa came into view. Keanu barely waited for them to open fully before guiding his car up the long driveway. The grounds, usually so meticulously maintained, seemed eerily still in the darkness. No lights shone from the windows of the main house, adding to the sense of unease that had been building throughout his drive. Parking haphazardly near the front entrance, Keanu practically leapt from the car. His key fumbled in the lock for a moment before he burst through the door, calling out into the silence. "Maria, Casey, Freya?" His voice echoed through the empty foyer, met only by an unsettling quiet. Heart-pounding, Keanu began a thorough search of the villa. Each room he entered told a different part of the story of their hasty departure. In Laura's bedroom, the scene was one of complete disarray. Clothes were strewn about, drawers left open as if someone had packed in a great hurry. But it was the bed that truly caught his attention. Pillows stained with what looked horribly like dried blood, and scattered across the nightstand were various medication bottles, some tipped over in apparent haste. Moving to the twins' room, Keanu found signs of an interrupted routine that spoke volumes about the suddenness of whatever had occurred. Textbooks lay open on desks, backpacks tossed aside as if in mid-homework session. A half-finished math worksheet peeked out from under a scattered pile of colored pencils. The sight of their abandoned belongings, usually so carefully organized, made Keanu's heart ache. In the hallway, he noticed the bathroom light still burning, a steady drip from the faucet creating a rhythmic backdrop to the otherwise silent house. It was as if time had stopped suddenly, freezing this moment of crisis in place. Maria's room stood in stark contrast to the chaos elsewhere. It was neat and organized, but the carefully made bed and empty closet spoke of a planned departure. Essential items were missing, her bag and her favorite sweater that usually hung on the back of her door. As Keanu made his way to the kitchen, hoping to find some note or message explaining the situation, he noticed a stack of mail on the island counter. Bills from the household utilities were mixed with statements from Laura's rehab center, but what caught his eye was an unexpected envelope from a hospital he didn't recognize. With slightly trembling hands, Keanu tore open the envelope. Inside were prescription receipts and medical documentation that suggested an ongoing issue he had known nothing about. Confusion turned to frustration as he scanned the papers. Why hadn't Maria mentioned this? Why had Laura kept silent about whatever condition she was dealing with? Using the number from the hospital paperwork, Keanu dialed with a sense of desperate hope. Despite the late hour, a tired-sounding receptionist answered. Keanu's status as the villa's owner and his connection to Laura managed to get him some basic information, but the details remained frustratingly vague. Yes, Laura was in intensive care. Yes, she was accompanied by her daughters and a house assistant. No, we couldn't give specifics over the phone. Armed with at least the location of the hospital, Keanu headed back to his car. As he input the address into his GPS, a new sense of urgency filled him. The rural roads presented fresh challenges in the dead of night. Poor lighting forced him to use his high beams, and the unfamiliar route demanded his full attention. Suddenly, a black van came speeding around a curve, nearly colliding with Keanu's car. He swerved, heart pounding, and watched in his rearview mirror as the van continued its reckless pace down the road. The incident left him shaken, adding another layer of surreal tension to the night. Instinctively, Keanu reached for his phone to call Robbie, wondering if there was some connection between the speeding van and his friend's recent case. But the call went straight to voicemail, leaving Keanu alone with his thoughts and fears as he pressed on towards the hospital, every minute feeling more crucial than the last. The night seemed to stretch endlessly before him, full of unanswered questions and growing dread. Whatever lay ahead at the hospital, Keanu knew that the peaceful life they had all been building over the past months had been shattered, and he could only hope that the pieces could somehow be put back together again. The harsh, fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor cast long shadows as Keanu hurried towards room 231, the information he'd managed to extract from the tired-looking administrator at the front desk. His footsteps echoed in the quiet hallway, the late hour meaning most visitors had long since departed. As he rounded the corner, a familiar figure came into view. Maria sat slumped in an uncomfortable-looking plastic chair outside Laura's room, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. Across her lap, Casey and Freya were curled up asleep, their young faces showing traces of dried tears even in slumber. The scene perfectly captured the weight of their vigil, and Keanu felt a lump form in his throat at the sight. Maria's head snapped up at the sound of his approach, relief flooding her features. "Mr. Reeves," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank God you're here." Keanu crouched down beside her, taking care not to wake the sleeping twins. "I'm sorry I didn't see your message earlier. What's going on, Maria? Why didn't you answer when I called?" "I didn't want to disturb the girls' sleep, sir. It took some time to settle them down." Maria's eyes filled with fresh tears as she began to recount the afternoon's events. "It all happened so fast," she whispered. "Laura had been coughing all day, but she insisted she was fine. Then suddenly she started coughing up blood. There was so much of it all over the floor." Keanu listened intently as Maria described Laura's stubborn insistence that she just needed rest, and how quickly that changed when the coughing fit wouldn't stop. The taxi ride to the hospital had turned dramatic when Laura began vomiting blood, forcing Maria to pay extra for the cleanup. "I had to leave her with the doctors," Maria continued, her voice thick with emotion. "They were running tests and I needed to get back to meet the twins after school. When I got home, there was still blood on the floor. The girls were so scared I had to explain what was happening." "Coughing blood?" Keanu asked. "Has she been sick all these times?" Guilt clouded Maria's expression as she admitted to keeping Laura's declining health a secret from Keanu. "I thought it was just a persistent virus from the school's flu season," she said. Laura kept insisting she was fine, that she just needed time to recover, but days turns to week, and weeks to months. As Maria's story unfolded, Keanu began to piece together a picture of the past months that he had missed. After everyone had recovered from a bout of flu, Laura's condition had continued to worsen. She had claimed it was just her asthmatic bronchitis triggered by the illness, but there had been an increasing frequency of pharmacy visits, new medicines appearing, even a nebulizer. "She started going out more often for longer periods," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper now. "I assumed it was for treatment, but she never wanted to talk about it. I should have pushed harder, should have told you sooner. I'm so sorry, Mr. Reeves." Keanu placed a comforting hand on Maria's shoulder. "It's not your fault," he said gently. "But I need to understand everything now. Did you ever see any hospital documentation? Any official diagnosis?" Maria shook her head slowly. "I hardly ever saw any official hospital paperwork. There were some letters once or twice, but looking back, the medications didn't come from the hospital, just pharmacy bags. I think she might have been self-medicating, only seeing a doctor occasionally instead of getting proper care." The weight of this revelation settled heavily between them. Keanu stood, his mind racing with this new information. "I'm going to try to find out more from the doctors or nurses," he said. "Will you be okay here with the girls?" Maria nodded, managing a weak smile. "We'll be fine. They're finally getting some real sleep." As Keanu turned to leave, a thought struck him. "Have you eaten anything, Maria?" She shook her head again. "I've been saving what cash I have for a taxi home, just in case." Without another word, Keanu headed for the hospital cafeteria. The late hour meant limited options, but he managed to secure some sandwiches, fruit, and bottles of water. It wasn't much, but it was something. When he returned with the provisions, Maria's eyes welled up with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, careful not to wake the twins as she accepted the food. As Maria ate, Keanu paced to the nurse's station, his thoughts a tangle of questions and mounting concern. The hospital corridor stretched long and quiet, its stillness punctuated only by the occasional squeak of shoes or the faint, rhythmic beeping of a monitor in the distance. Standing by the unattended station, he scanned the dimly lit hallway, his worry for Laura mingling with the weight of an uncertain future pressing heavily on his shoulders. The late-night hours in the hospital corridor seemed to stretch endlessly. Keanu had just returned from another trip to the vending machines, armed with cups of mediocre coffee for himself and Maria, when he spotted a doctor and a nurse in a white coat, striding purposefully towards the nurse station. The physician's grim expression set a foreboding tone, even before any words were exchanged. Keanu straightened, setting the coffees aside as the doctor approached. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed to buzz louder in the tense moment before their conversation began. "Are you here for Laura Winters?" the doctor asked, his voice low and serious. Keanu nodded, introducing himself and gesturing to Maria and the still sleeping twins. "We're her family," he said, the word feeling both right and strange on his tongue. The doctor's diagnosis hit like a physical blow. "I'm afraid the news isn't good," he began, his tone professional but tinged with genuine sympathy. "Ms. Winters is suffering from stage 4 lung cancer. It's affecting all 5 lobes of her lungs and has spread to her lymph nodes and jugular vein." The medical terminology flowed rapidly, each detail adding to the horrifying picture of Laura's silent suffering. "We've already had to drain 2 liters of fluid from her lungs," the doctor continued. "There are blood clots, severe dysphagia, difficulty swallowing, and significant weight loss that we hadn't been previously aware of." Keanu felt as though the floor was tilting beneath him. How had Laura hidden this for so long? How had they all missed the signs? The doctor's voice cut through his swirling thoughts. "We need to act quickly," he said. "The immediate plan is surgery to install a chest tube and a port for chemotherapy. These are life-saving measures at this point." The urgency in the doctor's tone left no doubt. Decisions needed to be made, and quickly. Keanu's gaze shifted to Maria, whose trembling hand covered her mouth. The stillness of the corridor must have amplified the doctor's words, each one cutting through the air with a weight that couldn't be ignored. "What do we need to do?" Keanu asked, his voice sounding strange and distant to his own ears. "We'll need consent forms signed," the doctor replied. "Normally this would be done by next of kin, but given the circumstances—" The process hit a snag at the nurse's station. Laura's surgery required family consent, but her only family members were her underage daughters. Keanu's status as her benefactor created complications in the eyes of hospital bureaucracy. As papers were shuffled and regulations cited, Keanu felt a growing sense of frustration. Every moment spent navigating red tape was a moment Laura didn't have to spare. Finally, a compromise was reached. The twins would need to be awakened to witness Keanu's signature on the surgical consent forms. It wasn't ideal, but it was the fastest way to move forward. Gently, Maria roused Casey and Freya. Their sleepy confusion quickly turned to fear as they processed the situation, but their trust in Keanu never wavered. As he signed the forms, the girls clung to him, expressing through tears how much they had missed him. The reunion carried bittersweet undertones, joy at seeing him again mixed with the gravity of their current crisis. With the paperwork completed, the doctor pulled Keanu aside for a frank discussion of Laura's chances. "I want to be clear," he said quietly. "The surgery and subsequent treatment give her about a 50% chance of survival. It's not a guarantee, but it's her best hope." Keanu nodded, the weight of the decision settling heavily on his shoulders. "When will the surgery take place?" he asked. "We have an opening in the morning slot," the doctor replied. "It doesn't leave much time for preparation, but given the urgency of her condition, it's our best option." As they stepped into Laura's room, the sight of her surrounded by a web of medical equipment brought the gravity of the situation crashing down. She looked frail and noticeably thinner, her pallor a stark contrast to the vibrancy she'd had just months ago when Keanu last saw her. The twins crumpled at their mother's bedside, their sobs breaking the heavy silence as Maria wrapped them in her arms, whispering words of comfort through her own tears. Keanu stood a step back, an observer to their shared grief, feeling deeply present yet somehow detached from the raw, intimate family moment unfolding before him. After a few minutes, Keanu gently suggested that they all try to rest, even if just for a few hours. The girls settled onto the small sofa inside the room with Maria, while Keanu took up position in one of the plastic chairs, prepared for a long and anxious wait until morning. As the first hints of dawn began to color the sky outside the hospital window, Keanu found himself lost in thought. The events of the past few hours had shaken him to his core, forcing him to confront the fragility of the life they had been building. The artificial lighting of the hospital room gradually gave way to the soft, natural glow of morning. Keanu stirred from his uncomfortable position in the plastic chair, his neck stiff and his mind foggy from the fitful dozing that had passed for sleep. As his eyes adjusted to the growing light, he realized the twins were already awake and at Laura's bedside. Casey and Freya stood on either side of their mother's bed, their small hands clasped tightly in hers. Tears streamed silently down their cheeks as they whispered words too quiet for Keanu to hear. The morning sun streaming through the window caught the metallic surfaces of the medical equipment, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere that belied the gravity of the situation. Keanu rose quietly, not wanting to intrude on the intimate moment between mother and daughters. But as he approached, Laura's eyes flickered open, focusing on him with a mixture of relief and fear. Though unable to speak through the tubes helping her breathe, her gaze communicated volumes. "Hey," Keanu said softly, trying to infuse his voice with a confidence he didn't quite feel. "You're going to be okay, Laura. The doctors are going to take good care of you, and before you know it, we'll all be back at the villa." Laura shook her head slowly, a glimmer of disbelief in her tear-filled eyes, even though part of her desperately wanted to accept his words. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks as her grip on the twins' hands tightened, as if anchoring herself to them. Deep down it seemed she already knew the truth, that her body was failing her. Keanu leaned closer, his voice steady but imploring. "You have to stay strong, Laura. Fight for them. But no matter what happens, I'll be there for them, okay?" But even as he spoke, the words felt fragile, almost powerless against the unyielding rhythm of the machines around her. Their steady beeping seemed to echo the inevitable, a sound neither of them could escape. The arrival of nurses signaled that time was running out. As they prepared Laura for surgery, the twins clung to their mother's hands until the very last moment. Their small forms shook with suppressed sobs as Laura was wheeled out of the room. Keanu, Maria, and the girls followed the gurney as far as they were allowed, watching helplessly as Laura disappeared behind the double doors leading to the operating room. The fluorescent lights of the corridor created a tunnel-like effect, emphasizing the feeling of Laura being pulled away from them. Even after she was out of sight, the twins' hands remained raised in farewell, as if they could somehow reach through the doors to touch her one last time. No! A heavy silence fell over the group as they stood there, the finality of those closing doors weighing on them all. It was Maria who finally broke the quiet, her voice gentle but practical. "Perhaps we should return to the villa for some fresh clothes," she suggested. "The operation will take several hours, and we could all use a chance to freshen up." Keanu nodded, grateful for Maria's level-headedness. "You're right," he agreed, glancing at his watch. "The doctor said it would be a long procedure. We have time." As they made their way out of the hospital and to Keanu's car, the normalcy of the suggestion, changing clothes, freshening up, contrasted sharply with the gravity of their situation. It felt almost surreal to be considering such mundane tasks when Laura's life hung in the balance. The drive back to the villa was mostly silent, each of them lost in their own thoughts and worries. As they rounded a curve in the road, Keanu spotted a familiar black van ahead of them, this time pursued by 3 police cars with lights flashing and sirens wailing. The chase scene felt bizarrely out of place against the backdrop of their personal drama. Instinctively, Keanu reached for his phone, dialing Robbie again, hoping this time he would answer. The image of the van and the police car lingered in his mind. Was it somehow connected to the case Robbie had mentioned? His stomach churned as the call once again went straight to voicemail, the silence on the other end deepening the unease settling over him. As the flashing lights of the police cars faded into the distance, leaving the road ahead clear, Keanu couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something more was unfolding. The villa drew closer, but so did a sense of foreboding, as though he was heading toward answers he wasn't sure he wanted to find. Arriving at the villa, the group dispersed to shower and change. The familiar surroundings offered little comfort, each room holding echoes of Laura's presence. In the living room, dried bloodstains still marked the floor where she had collapsed, a stark reminder of how quickly life could change. As Keanu stood in the shower, letting the hot water wash over him, he tried to gather his strength for whatever lay ahead. The events of the past 24 hours had shaken him to his core, forcing him to confront the fragility of the life they had been building. Whatever the outcome of Laura's surgery, he knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. Dressing in fresh clothes, Keanu steeled himself for the return to the hospital. As he stepped out of his room, he was met by Maria and the twins, all looking slightly more refreshed, but with worry still etched deeply on their faces. Together, they prepared to face whatever news awaited them, united in their concern for Laura and the uncertain future that lay ahead. As the group prepared to leave the villa and return to the hospital, a small voice broke the tense silence. It was Freya, the younger of the twins, her eyes wide with a mixture of hesitation and urgency. "Mr. Reeves," she said softly, twisting the hem of her shirt in her hands, Could we maybe visit our old home, the trailer under the bridge?" Keanu blinked in surprise, caught off guard by the unexpected request. He glanced at Casey, who nodded in agreement with her sister, then at Maria, whose expression was one of understanding. "Are you sure?" Keanu asked gently. "We don't have to if you're not comfortable." "We want to," Casey chimed in, her voice stronger than her sister's. "There are some things there, things that were Mum's. We'd like to have them with us at the hospital." Understanding dawned on Keanu. This wasn't just about visiting their old home, it was about connecting with their mother in a tangible way during this crisis. despite his reservations about returning to the place where he had first encountered the girls in such dire circumstances. Keanu nodded. "All right," he said. "We'll go. Maria, would you like to come with us?" Maria shook her head. "I think I'll stay here and clean up a bit, maybe prepare some food for later. You three go ahead." The drive to the trailer was quiet, the twins sitting close together in the back seat, hands clasped. As they approached the bridge, Keanu felt a tightness in his chest, memories of that fateful night flooding back. He parked the car and helped the girls out, all three of them moving cautiously towards the battered trailer that had once been Laura and the twins' home. The smell hit them first, a lingering mix of alcohol, tobacco, and mustiness that spoke of long abandonment. It was as if time had stood still inside the cramped space, preserving a snapshot of their previous life. Keanu watched as Casey and Freya moved with purpose through the trailer, collecting specific items that held meaning for them. They gathered their matching Hello Kitty keychains, the first gift Keanu had ever given them, along with a handful of old photographs. Laura's tobacco case was carefully wrapped in a faded t-shirt, and her battered battery lantern was added to the small pile of treasures. As the twins searched, Keanu's eye caught something partially hidden under one of the built-in seats. Crouching down, he pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Smoothing it out, he found himself looking at what appeared to be a crudely drawn map. The lines were hurried and imprecise, making little sense to him at first glance. A small object fell from the folds of the paper, landing with a soft clink on the trailer's floor. Keanu bent to retrieve it, a key with a simple tag attached. The tag read locker, though Keanu couldn't see anything in the trailer that it might belong to. "Girls," he called softly, "do either of you know anything about this map or this key?" Casey and Freya looked up from their scavenging, shaking their heads in unison. "We've never seen those before," Casey said, her brow furrowed in confusion. Keanu nodded, pocketing both items. Their mystery added another layer to the already complex situation, and he made a mental note to look into it further when things settled down. As they prepared to leave the trailer, Keanu noticed the twins taking one last, lingering look around. Their expressions were a mix of nostalgia and relief, acknowledging their past while recognizing how far they had come. "Ready to go back to the hospital?" Keanu asked gently. The girls nodded, clutching their collected treasures close. The drive back felt heavier somehow, each mile bringing them closer to news they weren't sure they wanted to hear. The rural landscape passed in a blur, time seeming to move both too quickly and too slowly. Arriving at the hospital, they made their way back to the surgical waiting area. Maria was already there, having returned separately, her face etched with worry. Before Keanu could ask if there had been any news, he spotted the surgeon approaching, his expression grave. The doctor's appearance needed no words. His face told them everything before he even opened his mouth. "I'm so sorry," he began, his voice heavy with genuine regret. "We lost her. Laura didn't survive half the procedure." The twins' breakdown was immediate and heart-wrenching. Their collected mementos from the trailer, so precious just moments ago, now transformed into final connections to their mother. Keanu felt his own tears come as he tried to maintain strength for the girls. The morning's hope shattered in a single moment. They settled onto a nearby bench, shock settling over them like a heavy blanket. The hospital's routine continued around them. People walking past, phones ringing, life going on, while their world had stopped completely. The keychains and photographs lay forgotten in their laps, yesterday's treasures now transformed into tomorrow's bittersweet memories. As Keanu sat there, one arm around each of the sobbing twins, he felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on his shoulders. Whatever came next, he knew that these girls were now his to protect and care for. The initial shock of Laura's death gave way to a numbing fog as Keanu found himself thrust into the unfamiliar and coldly practical world of post-mortem arrangements. He had barely begun to process his own grief when a hospital administrator approached, clipboard in hand and sympathy carefully measured in her voice. "Mr. Reeves," she began, her tone professional but not unkind, "I'm very sorry for your loss. There are some matters we need to discuss regarding Ms. Winter's remains." Keanu nodded numbly, gently extricating himself from the twins who had cried themselves into an exhausted sleep against his shoulders. Maria took his place, murmuring soft words of comfort to the girls, as Keanu followed the administrator to a small windowless office. The fluorescent lights seemed harsher here, casting unflattering shadows as the administrator began to outline their options. Her words hit Keanu like physical blows as she explained the situation. Given Ms. Winter's lack of official residence and limited financial means, the administrator said, her voice carefully neutral, the standard procedure would be interment in a mass grave at the county cemetery. The suggestion of a mass grave for Laura hit Keanu like a punch to the gut. The idea of her being buried anonymously, without dignity or recognition, was unbearable. His immediate refusal came out sharper than he intended, tinged with anger born of grief and frustration. "No," he said firmly, cutting off the administrator mid-sentence. "That's not happening. I'll take full responsibility for Laura's burial arrangements." The administrator blinked, clearly taken aback by his vehemence. I see," she stammered, shuffling her papers. "In that case, there are some forms you'll need to fill out, and you'll need to contact a funeral home to arrange for transportation of the body." Keanu nodded, his mind already racing ahead. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found Patrick, his personal assistant. As the administrator busied herself with paperwork, Keanu stepped into the hallway to make the call. "Patrick," Keanu said urgently as soon as the line connected, "I need your help. Laura, the woman I've been helping, has passed away. I need you to arrange a private burial service somewhere discreet, either near the villa or my residence." He paused, his voice dropping to a firm, almost pleading tone. "And Patrick, this has to stay completely off the radar. No media, not a whisper. Everyone involved, vendors, personnel, needs to sign an NDA. The girls don't need any more exposure or public pressure on this, do you understand?" As Patrick acknowledged the instructions, promising to handle everything discreetly, Keanu felt a small measure of relief. At least this was something he could control, a way to ensure Laura received the dignity in death that had often eluded her in life. Returning to the office, Keanu began the tedious process of filling out form after form. Each signature felt like another small wound, a reminder of the finality of Laura's passing. As he worked through the stack of papers, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Robbie, the police officer he had been trying to reach earlier. Keanu excused himself once more, stepping into the hallway to take the call. "Keanu," Robbie's voice crackled through the line, tinged with concern. "I'm sorry for missing your calls, man. I just got your messages. What's going on? Are you all right?" "Robbie," Keanu said, relief and tension blending in his tone, "I've been trying to reach you all morning." "I'm sorry, Keanu," Robbie replied, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "I've been caught up in a pursuit. We were chasing a black van. The bastards got away, though. I haven't had a chance to check my messages until now." "A black van?" Keanu's voice sharpened. "How sure are you about that?" "Pretty sure," Robbie said, puzzled. "Why? How do you know about it?" "I was in the area," Keanu explained, his thoughts racing. "I saw the chase. It passed me on the way to the villa." "What are you doing out here?" Robbie asked, his tone shifting to curiosity. Keanu hesitated briefly before answering. "It's Laura," he said quietly. "She passed away this morning. I've been helping her and her daughters for a while. I'm arranging a private burial somewhere nearby." There was a pause on the other end before Robbie spoke again, his voice softer now. "Keanu, I'm sorry. That's tough. Are you okay?" "I'm managing," Keanu said with a weary sigh. "The girls are my priority now. I'll send you the details once it's finalized, but if you're free, I'd like you to come to the funeral." "Of course," Robbie agreed without hesitation. "Just let me know when and where. I'll be there." The weight of the conversation hung between them for a moment before Keanu spoke again. "This feels like more than just coincidence, Robbie. You chasing a black van, me running into the same one on the way to the villa. It feels connected somehow." "I was thinking the same thing," Robbie admitted. "But for now, let's focus on Laura. We'll figure out the rest later." "Yeah," Keanu said quietly. "Thanks, Robbie. I'll be in touch soon." As they ended the call, the sense of an unspoken connection lingered. Both men were left with the feeling that their paths were converging in ways neither could yet understand. Returning to the office, Keanu finished the remaining paperwork. The administrator provided him with a packet of information about grief counseling services, her manner softening slightly as she saw the toll the process was taking on him. "Mr. Reeves," she said as he prepared to leave, "I know this is a difficult time. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you need any further assistance or information." Keanu nodded, managing a small, grateful smile before heading back to the waiting area where Maria and the twins were still huddled together. As he approached, his phone buzzed with a text from Patrick confirming the burial arrangements for 9 a.m. the next morning. The location, while closer to town than initially hoped, was the best option given the short notice and need for privacy. Crouching down in front of the girls, Keanu gently roused them from their fitful sleep. "Casey, Freya," he said softly, "we need to go back to the villa now. We'll come back tomorrow to say goodbye to your mum." The twins nodded silently, their eyes red-rimmed and faces pale with exhaustion. As they stood, Keanu noticed the items they had collected from the trailer still clutched tightly in their hands, tangible links to their mother that seemed to offer some small comfort. The drive back to the villa was silent, each occupant of the car lost in their own thoughts and grief. As they pulled up to the house, Keanu found himself dreading the return to the space where Laura had spent her final months. Every corner would hold memories, reminders of the life they had been building, and the future that had been so cruelly cut short. Inside, the house felt oppressively quiet, the kind of silence that seemed to magnify the heaviness of the day. Keanu stood in the doorway, his gaze fixed on Maria as he broke the news of Laura's passing. Her face drained of color, her eyes wide with shock before the grief overtook her. It was a look he knew well, a mixture of disbelief and raw pain. Maria's hand trembled as she held onto the twins, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't believe it." She shook her head, trying to process the reality of the loss. She didn't linger, though. With a soft, steady voice, Maria gently guided the twins toward their room. "Come on, darling, let's get you changed and tucked in for a little rest." Her tone was soothing, a quiet effort to maintain some semblance of normalcy amidst the storm. As the door closed behind them, Keanu stood alone in the living room. The weight of the day, the urgency, the calls, the decisions settled heavily on his shoulders. His mind replayed the events like an endless loop. Laura's passing, the chase with the black van, the conversation with Robbie. It all felt like too much to bear in one moment. Maria had retreated to her own quarters, the door closed behind her. From within, the soft murmur of her prayers drifted through the walls, a gentle rhythm of words that seemed to fill the emptiness of the house. It was a sound that both soothed and reminded Keanu of the weight of everything they were facing. The rest of the day passed in a blur, the hours slipping by unnoticed as everyone sought their own solitude. The house, heavy with the weight of loss, seemed to hold its breath. Evening came and went without ceremony, the fading light offering no comfort. As night fell, it brought with it a different kind of quiet, one that was deep, unyielding, and filled with 1,000 unspoken thoughts. As the first hints of dawn began to color the sky, Keanu steeled himself for the day ahead. The burial would be a final farewell, but also the beginning of a new chapter. He had made a promise, both to Laura and to himself, to care for Casey and Freya. It was a responsibility he didn't take lightly, and one that would shape all of their lives in the years to come. With a deep breath, Keanu rose to wake the others. It was time to face the day, to honor Laura's memory, and to begin the long process of healing and moving forward. The road ahead would be challenging, but as he looked at the sleeping faces of the twins, Keanu knew that it was a journey worth taking. The early morning air was crisp and cool as Keanu guided his car along the winding road to the cemetery. In the back seat, Casey and Freya sat in silence, their small hands clasped tightly together. Maria occupied the passenger seat, her lips moving in silent prayer as she gazed out at the passing landscape. After 2.5 hours' drive, As they neared their destination, the first rays of sunlight began to pierce through the trees, casting long shadows across the road. The world seemed to be holding its breath, the usual morning sounds muted as if in respect for their somber journey. The cemetery gates came into view, ornate ironwork standing in stark contrast to the natural beauty surrounding it. Keanu parked the car and helped the twins out, their formal black dresses a poignant reminder of the occasion. Maria smoothed her own dark clothing, her eyes red-rimmed but her posture resolute. They made their way to the designated plot, where a small gathering had already formed. The priest stood solemnly beside the casket, which was adorned with a simple spray of wildflowers, a touch Keanu had requested, remembering Laura's love for the colourful blooms that grew near the villa. Robbie was there too, his police uniform exchanged for a sombre suit. He nodded gravely to Keanu as they approached, genuine sympathy evident in his eyes. The small group stood in stark contrast to the public appearances Keanu was accustomed to, the intimacy of the moment palpable in the morning air. As the priest began the service, his voice carried clearly in the quiet cemetery. Ancient verses of comfort and hope mingled with the gentle rustling of leaves, nature providing its own soft accompaniment to the words of farewell. When the time came for personal goodbyes, each mourner stepped forward to speak. Robbie went first, his words touching on friendship and justice, acknowledging the role Laura had played in bringing down the trafficking ring that had once controlled her life. Maria spoke next, her voice thick with emotion, as she recounted Laura's determination to build a better life for her daughters. Her words were full of maternal care, painting a picture of the woman Laura had become in her final months. Strong, loving, and fiercely protective of her children. The twins' farewell to their mother was heart-wrenching in its simplicity. Casey and Freya approached the casket together, their voices barely above a whisper as they shared childhood memories and expressed their love. Tears flowed freely as they placed the Hello Kitty keychains they had retrieved from the trailer atop the casket, a final gift to their mother. Keanu's own words came last, measured and heartfelt. He spoke of Laura's courage, her resilience in the face of unimaginable hardship, and the love she had shown for her daughters. As he finished, a sense of finality settled over the group, the weight of loss hanging heavy in the air. The priest said his final prayers, and the casket was slowly lowered into the earth. As the small group stood in respectful silence, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the solemnity of the moment. 3 men appeared at the edge of the gathering, rough-looking and poorly dressed, their presence immediately setting Keanu on edge. He instinctively moved to shield the twins, directing Maria with a quick gesture to take them to the safety of the car. Robbie's reaction confirmed Keanu's suspicions. These men were connected to Axel's criminal network, the same group that had been terrorizing the police officer personally. Their appearance at Laura's funeral could not be a coincidence. As Maria hurried the twins away, Keanu and Robbie stood their ground, tension crackling in the air. The confrontation erupted suddenly, disrupting the sacred space of the cemetery. Robbie found himself wrestling with 2 of the men, while Keanu faced off against the third. In the chaos of the fight, the key from Laura's trailer fell from Keanu's pocket. The reaction of the attackers to its appearance revealed its significance. Clearly, this was what they had come for. With a swift kick, Keanu sent the key skittering across the ground, buying precious seconds as their assailants scrambled to retrieve it. Just as the situation threatened to escalate further, the wail of approaching sirens cut through the air. Robbie had managed to call for backup, and the arrival of additional officers sent the attackers fleeing into the surrounding woods. As the dust settled, Keanu retrieved the key and the crumpled map from where they had fallen. Robbie approached, his uniform disheveled from the fight but his eyes alert with interest. "Keanu," he said urgently, "where did you get those?" Quickly, Keanu explained about finding the items in Laura's old trailer. "The sketch looks like some kind of map," he added, "but it's too roughly drawn for me to make sense of it." Robbie's eyes widened as he examined the items. "This might be the key to cracking the whole case wide open," he said, excitement mixing with disbelief in his voice. Laura was still helping us even at the end. As the backup officers secured the scene and began taking statements, Robbie pulled Keanu aside. "I need to get these back to the station," he said, gesturing to the map and key. "This could be the break we've been waiting for. I'll tell you all the details later, buddy." Keanu nodded, understanding the importance of what they had stumbled upon. As Robbie prepared to leave, he paused, turning back to Laura's grave. "Thank you," he said softly, addressing the freshly turned earth. "You're still fighting the good fight even now. Rest easy, Laura, we'll take it from here." With a final nod to Keanu, Robbie departed, leaving the cemetery with its air of disrupted peace. Keanu made his way back to the car where Maria waited with the twins, their faces pale with fear after witnessing the altercation from afar. As he prepared to leave, Keanu cast one last look at Laura's grave. The morning sun now shone fully on the simple headstone, illuminating the words they had chosen to remember her by. "Beloved mother, brave soul forever free." As he entered the car, Keanu saw that Maria and the girls were safely secured inside. He took a deep breath, then turned to address them. "It's safe now," he said gently. "If you want to say a proper goodbye to your mother, we can do that now." The twins exchanged a glance, then nodded silently. Maria gave Keanu a questioning look, and he nodded his assent. Together, Maria and the twins exited the car and made their way back to Laura's grave. While waiting for Maria, Casey, and Freya, Keanu sat in the stillness of the car, his mind shifting between the heavy weight of the day and the unsettling quiet that had filled the house. Then, like a flash of clarity amidst the fog, an unexpected thought crossed his mind. The dashcams, both in his current car and the one he had purchased for Laura at the villa. The realization hit him like a sudden gift, a possible window into Laura's final months, a way to uncover something that might have slipped through the cracks. The dashcam footage could hold crucial clues, footage that might reveal the truth about what had happened to her, or at the very least, offer some answers. The thought ignited a spark of determination in him. He made a mental note to check the dashcam in Laura's car as soon as they returned to the villa. By the time the girls finished their goodbyes and rejoined him in the car, Keanu had already shifted his focus. The group set off in silence, each person lost in their own thoughts, the gravity of the day's events weighing heavily on them. The road ahead stretched out like an endless ribbon, but no one spoke, the silence speaking volumes. With a final look at the place where Laura now rested, Keanu turned his gaze forward. The drive back to the villa was a quiet one, the hum of the car the only sound as each of them processed the emotions they could barely begin to understand. Upon arriving at the villa, Maria helped the girls inside, her movements gentle as she guided them through the door, her eyes tired but determined. Keanu, however, barely glanced back at them as he made his way to Laura's car. He had only one focus now, the dashcam footage. As soon as he slid into the driver's seat, the quiet hum of the car enveloped him, the screen blinking to life. He began scrolling through the footage, each hour of video uncovering a side of Laura he had never seen before. Every clip told its own quiet story, yet one brimming with intent and resolve. Keanu's grip on the wheel tightened as the dashcam footage revealed the places she had gone, the people she had met, and the conversations that had unfolded. The images of Laura, frail yet unwavering, painted a portrait of a woman far more than just a victim of her circumstances. The footage uncovered Laura's hidden crusade against the trafficking network. Despite her illness, she had been meticulously gathering evidence, piecing together the puzzle with unwavering determination. Keanu's heart raced as he watched her strategize, making calls, meeting informants, and carefully hiding crucial pieces of evidence in locations for the police to find, all in an effort to expose the criminal operation. Her bravery was evident, undaunted by the looming shadow of her own mortality. Laura had fought not just for herself, but for countless others she would never meet, driven by a deep sense of justice. With a newfound sense of urgency, Keanu dialed Robbie's number, the sound of the ringing on the other end a brief distraction from the weight of what he had just uncovered. "Keanu?" Robbie's voice came through, sounding strained but alert. "What's going on? You okay?" "I'm fine," Keanu replied, his voice tinged with the intensity of what he had just seen. But Laura was doing something. Something important. She was gathering evidence against the network. All this time she'd been collecting intel on the trafficking operation, and no one knew, not even me. Robbie paused for a moment, and Keanu could hear the shift in his tone. What do you mean, collecting evidence? Do you have proof? I've got hours of footage. She recorded everything, Keanu continued, his voice steady but filled with awe. She was methodical, strategic. She knew what she was doing. She knew what was at stake. She was sick, but she never stopped. This was bigger than just her fight. This was about exposing them. She wasn't just a victim, Robbie. She was a fighter. There was silence on the other end, and Keanu could almost hear Robbie's thoughts running through his mind. This is huge, Keanu. We can't let this slip through the cracks. We need to get that footage to the station, and we need to do it now. I'll send my man over there right away. Good. And Keanu... Robbie's voice softened. I'm sorry, man. I didn't know about any of this. She really was something, huh? Keanu let out a long breath, his mind still reeling from the discovery. Yeah, she was, and the girls, they need to know what she did. They need to understand who their mother really was. The truth. It's what they deserve. Keanu hung up, the weight of his next task pressing down on him. He stood there for a moment, gathering his thoughts. The discovery of Laura's efforts would change everything. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about continuing her fight, her legacy. As he walked back into the villa, his resolve hardened. He would share the truth with the twins, and in doing so, he would help carry on Laura's fight for justice. The legacy she had built, though hidden for so long, would now take center stage. Keanu entered the family room of the villa, still processing the footage he'd just uncovered and how to deliver the truth to the grieving girls. He found Maria sitting with the twins in the couch. The quiet of the house felt heavier now, charged with the weight of the recent loss. He sat down across from them, the twins looking up expectantly. I think it's time we talked about your mum, Keanu said gently, meeting the twins' eyes. There are some things you should know about her, things that might help you understand how special she really was. Maria nodded, her hand resting on each of the girls' shoulders, offering silent support as Keanu took a deep breath. He didn't want to burden them, but the truth needed to be shared. He started speaking carefully, knowing the importance of his words. Your mum was incredibly brave, he said, his voice thick with admiration. Even when she was very sick, she was working to help other people. You remember the map and the key we found in the trailer? The twins nodded, their eyes wide, listening intently. Those were just part of the story, Keanu continued. Turns out your mum was secretly gathering evidence against a dangerous criminal network that she used to be a part of. She was fighting back, trying to stop them from hurting other people, and she did it all while she was sick, never letting that stop her. Keanu paused, watching the twins as they processed the information. He could see their faces slowly change from confusion to awe. So, Mom was like a secret agent? Casey asked, her voice filled with wonder. Keanu smiled softly. In a way, yes, she was very clever and she cared about others so much. She wanted to make sure that no one else would have to suffer the way she did. Freya frowned slightly. But why didn't she tell us, or you or Maria? Maria spoke up then, her voice calm but firm. I think your mom did it because she wanted to protect you. She didn't want you to be scared, and she didn't want you to be in any danger. Keanu nodded in agreement. She loved you both so much. Everything she did so you could have a safe, happy future. The weight of the revelation settled over the room as they all reflected in silence. Keanu watched the girls as they processed the new information, their young minds coming to terms with their mother's strength and sacrifice. After a long moment, Casey spoke up again, her voice small but determined. But who's going to take care of us now? Keanu felt a pang in his chest at the question, but before he could respond, Maria stood, her voice soft yet steady. I will, she said, meeting the girl's eyes. I'll take care of you. I've always considered you my family, and nothing will change that. I will foster you both, and you'll have a home here with me, always. The twins exchanged a silent look before nodding, the weight of their uncertainty easing slightly. Keanu felt a rush of gratitude toward Maria. She had always been a stabilizing force for them, and now she was stepping forward, ready to be their rock. The conversation shifted toward more practical matters, as Keanu outlined his plans for their continued care and the next steps for their education. Maria gently steered the girls toward the idea of returning to school, promising them they would face the future together, no matter how difficult it seemed. Later, as the day wore on, the atmosphere in the villa began to shift from grief to something more hopeful. Keanu made sure to reassure the girls, telling them that the villa would be their home for as long as they wanted it to be, and that he would always be there for them. Casey and Freya, after exchanging a glance, spoke up together. Can we call you Uncle Keanu?" Keanu's heart clenched at their question. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. "Of course you can," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I'd be honored." The twins, filled with emotion, rushed forward and hugged him tightly. Maria watched, tears in her eyes but a smile on her face as she witnessed the bond forming between them. For a moment, the weight of loss lightened, replaced by the comfort of love and belonging. As the evening unfolded, the villa filled with small moments of healing. Maria cooked Laura's favorite pasta dish, filling the house with familiar, comforting aromas. The girls sat at the counter, sharing stories of their mum and her attempts at cooking in their old trailer. Laughter, though tinged with sadness, began to seep into their conversation. Before dinner, Keanu raised a glass of water in a quiet toast. "To Laura," he said softly, "a brave woman, a loving mother, and a true hero. May we honor her memory by living with the same courage and kindness she showed." The twins, their voices quiet but filled with pride, echoed, "To Mom." The night passed in a peaceful rhythm, each of them finding small ways to heal. Keanu, while helping Maria clear the table, felt a sense of peace settle in his heart. He had made a promise to Laura that he would protect her daughters, honor her memory, and carry on her legacy. And he intended to do just that. As the evening wound down and the girls helped Maria finish up, Keanu stepped outside onto the porch for a moment of reflection. The stars began to appear in the night sky, and he silently made a vow to Laura. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but as he turned and headed back inside to the warmth of the villa, he knew they would face them together. They were now a family, bound by love, strength, and the enduring legacy of a courageous woman.